All right, let's bring in the critics. Peggy Nash is the finance critic for the NDP. She's in Toronto. John McCallum is a former Liberal Defence Minister and the current Treasury Board critic. He joins me here in the studio. Welcome to you both. Peggy, I want to go to you first. Why should we help out Europe? It's self-inflicted fiscal distress. Why should Canada kick in any cash?
Well, we haven't said that they should, that Canada should. What we have said is that the Prime Minister should stop criticizing Europe and focus on what we need here in Canada. Clearly, he was over-optimistic in terms of his economic projections. The recovery is still very fragile. There's a lot of uncertainty in the economy, and he has no plan in case we're into another recession. So we've been pushing him to tell us what is the plan if the economy starts to soften. He's hinted in Europe that he has a plan, but he's refused to talk about it here. So we think, in fact, he should focus on our issues here in Canada and let the Europeans solve their issues there.
I thought he was yelling at the Europeans to get a plan. Never mind promising one here. John McCallum, International Monetary Fund, should we be part of the bailout?
Certainly this is a global crisis with global implications. If they have a huge crisis, we will be affected. When there's a global problem, the IMF is appropriate to step in. And the IMF wants to step in.
That's what they're there for, aren't they?
That's what they're there for. Yeah. And it could have huge implications for us. So I think it's very stingy for Canada to be one of the few countries not to be a part of this. We're less than 3% of the IMF contribution in total. If you put enough money in, it's less likely you'll need to use any of it because you'll calm the markets. So I think for Canada to step back from an international effort to support Europe is not bad, not good. It's not in our international tradition of being an active member of the international community.
All right. Peggy makes an interesting argument. Why won't the New Democrats say Canada should participate in this then?
Well, of course we do on an ongoing basis, Don, contribute to the IMF. The question is whether it's necessary for Canada to contribute to some special fund. I don't think that's clear at the moment. I think that we have not heard a coherent plan from the Europeans as to what they're going to undertake. Really, I mean, the head of the IMF has said she wants to lock all of the leaders of these countries in a room and not let them out until they have a plan. I think that's probably not a bad idea, and I think it's jumping the gun to say Canada should be part of a bailout when we don't really know what the plan is there.
I just want to read one line from John Baird, and he's very colorful, as you know, and he says, "This Prime Minister will not force hardworking Canadian taxpayers to bail out sumptuous Euro welfare state countries and the wealthy bankers that lend to them." John, like, why the incendiary language?
I think this is just crazy ideology coming out of this Conservative government. I agree that Europe has not handled this well, and I agree it would be good to lock them up in a room together until they come up with a plan, because they have not done this well at all. And that's partly because you have so many of them that have to collectively agree. Whereas in the cases of the U.S., it's way easier because it's just one government. So yes, Europe has problems. But when a major region of the world has problems, I think it's up to the international community and the IMF, whose job it is, as you just said, to provide support. Yes, force them to come to an agreement or push them to come for an agreement, but not go empty-handed at a time that could be a major crisis for the whole world, including Canada.
I want you to put on your chief economist hat for just a second on this question.
I just was, actually.
Oh, was that? Good imitation of it, but anyway, you know, you were a former chief economist. I want to know what this jobless numbers mean. Is it just a sort of a continuation of a trend? Are you seeing anything in the fact we only created a modest amount of new jobs?
Well, I think it's definitely a lackluster month. 7,000 jobs is almost the same as nothing. It's good for those 7,000 people, but it's a tiny little blip. You need about twice that just to cater to the new people coming into the labor force. Now, admittedly, we had 2 strong months prior to this month, but I think overall it's a pretty lackluster report, and I think overall, partly because of Europe, partly because of other factors, we're probably in for pretty lackluster growth over coming months.
I think probably a lot of countries in Europe would take lackluster growth as a dream scenario. Peggy Nash, what's your take?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is ongoing softening in the economy. I think that the finance minister's numbers were overly optimistic because we knew that things were not resolved in Europe. The economy is still soft in the U.S. Now we see some signs of slowness in Asia. And if you break down those numbers that were released today, most of the new jobs, or a lot of the new jobs, were self-employment, many of them part-time, although we did see some uptick in the manufacturing sector. Overall, we still have a major loss of manufacturing jobs. So ongoing softness, and I think that there is justifiable concern about the budget that this government has brought in, which is an austerity budget, and which is going to take more out of the economy. It's going to have a dampening effect on the economy. I don't believe that's the right approach at this point in time.
Last question to you, John McCallum. Dutch disease. The manufacturing sector did show some strength in this job creation. Is Dutch disease a myth in the Canadian situation, in your view?
It's certainly hugely overrated. If you look at some states in the U.S. and compare with provinces in Canada, you see a very similar pattern of manufacturing jobs. So I think it's absolutely wrong for Mr. Mulcair to pit the East against the West with some semi-half-baked theory which divides Canadians. I don't
John,
think that's the right approach.
You know,
Last word to you, Peggy. You got 20 seconds.
You know, I think that there's broad consensus amongst the Canadian public that the polluters should be responsible for their pollution. The polluters should pay. That's what Tom Mulcair was saying, and I believe most Canadians agree with that. Yes, he absolutely was.
What he was talking about was Dutch disease.
And it was others who were spinning that as a divisive factor. But I think he was really clear that we need a more balanced approach to our economy and that the polluters should pay.
Okay. Good way to end it. Peggy Nash in Toronto, John McCallum here in the studio. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.